today's topic is receiving life as a gift. It's kind of in line with our other conversations for this week, and I'm eager to jump in with you on this topic. But before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to get settled in and present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flowing into your lungs, flooding your bloodstream, nourishing your cells, bringing vitality and life and energy and health. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine sparkling, brilliant white light flowing into every molecule, every electron, lighting you up, invigorating, energizing, electrifying you. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any remaining tension. Now let's just bring ourselves present by pressing our palms together and softly rubbing your fingers against your palms, feeling how delicious that sensation is, and allowing yourselves to enjoy the physicalness that we are in this world. So welcome, welcome. Great to be here and great to be with you. I'm so grateful to share this time with you. And today's topic is building on the topics that we've spoken about so far this week. We talked about self-assessment, and we talked about what kind of perspective we take on that. And we talked about life as a sacred pilgrimage. And if life is a sacred pilgrimage, it's a gift, right? Or what if we receive life as a gift? And what happens if instead of feeling at the effect of life or victim to life or like we're enduring life, what if we were able to imagine that rather than happening to us, life were happening for us and through us? And we've talked about this before, but it's such a powerful, powerful shift of perspective when we can imagine that all the events of our lives are happening for us. Uh, because one of the things we've spoken about is how powerful gratitude and appreciation are in elevating our frequency and our state. And when we recognize life as happening for us, then we have an innate appreciation for that. Now, the thing is that there are tough situations that happen in our lives. There are devastatingly heartbreaking and painful things that occur, and it's hard to imagine, particularly in those moments, how life is happening for us. But hello, Tammy. Welcome, welcome. We're talking about life as a gift and life happening for us and through us rather than to us. And so, in thinking about the hard, good morning, Dido. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. In thinking about the hard knocks that we get in life, we often experience these things as deep tragedies, and the experience of something as a tragedy is an interpretation. Experiencing the sadness of something is experiencing the sadness of it, and the tragedy part is where our interpretation and our story comes in. Not to say it's not true, uh, not to say it's not justified, but that we get to choose whether something whether we receive something as a gift, regardless of feeling sad or angry or hurt or in pain, or if we allow ourselves to look for the gift, sorry, in these circumstances in our lives, it transforms our experience of those circumstances and of our lives. So even when we're moving through the darkness, even though it's taking every ounce of courage and strength that we have to put one foot in front of the other, if we are able to receive this experience as a gift somehow, then it enables us to move through potentially more with more grace, potentially with more ease, with less resistance. And the resistance is what ends up making our excuse me, our experiences that much more painful. So I know that we've talked of people with illness, for instance. Perhaps you receive a diagnosis, for instance, or someone you love receives a diagnosis of cancer or COVID or who knows what, and it seems like a tragedy. And there may be tragic elements. I'm not trying to whitewash any of that. I'm simply saying that even in tragedy, we can experience a gift. And it may be in the transformation that the tragedy propels within us. It may be that that we gain a new perspective on life. I'm going to clear my throat for a second. I had to spare you that, and unfortunately, it didn't really work. I don't know what's going on with me. Hello, Lenora. Wonderful to have you here. Welcome, welcome. Anyway, so if we look at the challenges of our lives as grist for the mill, as things that are helping to refine us. We had this conversation a little bit yesterday. Then we can receive and perhaps learn the lessons and make the growth more quickly than we might otherwise be able to. Being immersed in the tragedies. I remember when my dad was dying, and it was a very difficult time, and I was very keenly aware of how he was done. He was just done. He had enough. He just did not want to go on any longer. And I had the privilege of being with him in his last days, and I was present when he died with him. And as sorrowful as that was for me, as much of a loss as it was for me, I knew that it was a blessing for him. And it was a blessing for me, that he allowed me to be present. Good morning, Danette. Welcome, welcome. So I could just be in despair. Obviously, I still have sadness about my dad's passing, but I recognize the gifts in it, and I recognize the blessings in it, and in some ways it was very healing, I think, for both of us to be able to share that very sacred moment of passing. And we do get to choose how we contextualize life. And with so many opportunities now to be questioning our purpose and our reason for being and our reason for being here, adopting the perspective that life happens for me and through me really has profoundly helped me in navigating the shadow side. The trick is to remember that that life is happening for us and through us rather than to us. And especially in the moments of the deepest despair or upset, that's when it's most critical to remember, and it's also when we might be most challenged to remember. And we've all been through some very challenging times, certainly most recently and most likely throughout our lives. And if we are embracing these challenges as a gift that are helping to refine us, and we do embrace life as a sacred pilgrimage rather than a sentence, the visceral experience of life transforms. And I believe that in that shift of energy, of frequency, that we then shift the opportunities that present themselves, that we have the opportunity to move out of that pattern of darkness more readily. So this is so interesting, and I think I've spoken about it before, but um, I have a client who was talking about how their significant other was challenged by, it felt like there was some kind of dark cloud energy following them around. And then one day, uh, the client actually, it was starting to experience that dark cloud energy. And we did a session and it cleared for the client, and subsequently seems to have cleared from their significant other as well. And I am so curious about this because what shifted was a context. What shifted was a frequency. And maybe there was a dark cloud that we literally got to purge. But what happened, even if that's the case, was that there was a shift of energy. And that shift of energy opened up new vistas, new possibilities, um, and new perspectives and new opportunities. And we do have power in our lives, that we don't have to be at the effect of them, even when we're going through depression, even when we reach frustration, even when we're in despair. Good morning, Irma. I'm so glad you're here. Uh, even through those times, if we can somehow allow ourselves to be present to, we may not know why we're going through this, but we can receive it and receive it as a gift, even though that may not make sense. If we can allow the feeling, for instance, of depression, if we're able to allow that it's serving me somehow, that there's some larger purpose to it, even though it's excruciating. And perhaps it gives us maybe a little more resilience, a little more capacity to accept accept where we are, and to move through that with greater gentleness to ourselves. I talk here. So Danette says, wow, this is me right now. So much going on. It's really hard. Yeah. So Danette, I know that you are not alone. And I realize that you not being alone doesn't make it any easier for you to go through what you're going through right now. And I think a lot of people are going through things that are really, really hard, really deep, dark emotions. And I know we tend to talk more about navigating the darkness, and that's because it's such a challenge. And in recognizing that things are really hard, um, maybe in allowing yourself to recognize a bigger context, perhaps, that this is a passage. It's a really hard passage. And yesterday we were talking about life as a sacred pilgrimage. On a pilgrimage, we don't expect it to be easy. We part of the magnificence of the pilgrimage itself is that it challenges us. It challenges us to bring forth our greatest strength, and our more strength than we could ever imagine having. That it calls us to rise beyond our limitations, and to continue. So and the other thing too about the gift, like life happening for us when things are really hard, sometimes that's an indicator that there might be another way to do things. And Tammy says, I've been trying to refocus my reaction to the hardships. Exactly. That's what this is about, is to say, yes, there are challenges and difficulties throughout our lives, and we can refocus and reframe our relationship to those hardships. And one of the things that makes hardships really harder is our resistance to them. And what I mean by that is, we often say, this, I want this over. And of course you do, I get it. But the more we want it to be over, the more we're resisting it, the more deeply entrenched it may become. The more we say it shouldn't be this way, the more resistance we're creating. And the idea is that there are these emotions that they really truly do move through as energy. And as these emotions move through, sometimes there are incidences that kind of anchor them, or that, through that moment, we anchor those emotions in our bodies, and then we get to find ways of releasing them. Once they're more deeply entrenched, it's more challenging, potentially more challenging, to release them. One of the tools, or one of the things that helps in that release, is to not add to the entrenchment by resisting even more. And uh, when oftentimes, and I've seen it over and over and over again, oftentimes we make circumstances so unbearable that we have to change, rather than choosing a difficult choice that we know we need to make. So Irma says, I want to get the balance between acknowledging the emotion and not getting caught up in it. And that's a delicate balance, Irma. It is kind of like walking a tightrope, because we can acknowledge the feeling without having to name it. We don't have to name it sadness. We can feel the feeling in the body. We don't have to name it depression. Sometimes naming it can give us some idea of what's going on, but the important thing is to not get deeply caught into the story about it that justifies it, that further entrenches it, that creates resistance. So when we're talking about the emotion, um, I'm primarily talking about a sensation. Uh, and what I notice, and we interpret. So, we might say, oh, that's sadness, that's despair, that's devastation, that's depression. As we name it, we're sometimes giving ourselves clarity and sometimes just uh, exacerbating the the experience. But as we feel the feelings and breathe into the feelings, then they have an ability to move if we're able to do that without adding story and judgment to it. But I think when we talk about these hardships, it's I was saying that sometimes we make things so completely unbearable that we have no choice but to do something different. And um, I know that, like, I used to exhaust myself to the point where I would get sick and then I'd have to stay in bed. And now I am much more respectful of when my body is and being is saying, enough, I need a break. And I respect it and I take a break. And in fact, well, the point is that our bodies give us signals, our beings, our emotions give us signals that, if we're miserable, it's because in some respects, in some situations, certainly, it's because the life that we have structured for ourselves isn't working for us. And how unhappy do we have to be before we allow ourselves to make a change? This is the question, because our inner self knows what we need. Our inner self is going to call to you and tell you, hey, you need to make a change here. And the question is, if you ignore that, those messages are going to get louder and louder and louder until ultimately you don't have a choice. I remember at one point I was so miserable, completely miserable in my life, that it took me realizing that I had decided to commit suicide. I had decided where I was going to go die before I would allow myself to make a change, a radical change in my life that I needed to be able to stay alive. And that's crazy. It was crazy of me to let myself get to such a point of misery before I would allow myself the freedom to pursue something that my heart was calling for. And I pray that you don't do that to yourself. I pray that you don't let yourself get into such an extreme of despair and misery that that you finally have to make a change in order, like you finally have no choice but to choose. I mean, you do always have choice. You always have choice. But it's almost as if when we create these circumstances that are so extreme that we then are justified in following the call of our heart. And I'm here to say the call of your heart is there for you because that's who you came here to be. And so this hero's journey, this journey into the darkness, to come out into the light, this is something that so many of us have. Well, it's an archetype, right? The hero's journey. We go through the darkness, we come out to the light. And I wonder if we could maybe just go through the dimness instead of the darkness. I mean, I wonder if that's a possibility, like without having to go to the ends of the earth, or to the end, the absolute end, where you're holding on by a thread before you're willing to make a change. I know that that's what it took for me. And that's because I wasn't aware enough, or at that time, to be respectful of this call, this urgent call that's there. I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and ignored it and ignored it and ignored it, until I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And I yes, it made me make a change, but I could have made life so much easier for myself had I given myself permission to honor what I knew was in my heart, you know? So this is a tough season for so many people. Danette says, so true. I live in my head too much and it's exhausting. You know what, Danette, I can relate. I mean, the resistance, the confusion that we create for ourselves over should I, shouldn't I, shouldn't I, when our heart is saying one thing and our circumstances are saying another. I think that sometimes that it's so exhausting. It's so exhausting, to where we get to the point where we're ready to give up, or we just say no more. And I think we use that extreme sometimes to justify the radical change, to justify it for ourselves, and to justify it for the other people in our lives that might judge us. It's like I have redefined myself, or reinvented myself, made in major ways 3 times in my life. And I have had people say that they admire that or whatever, and I can say it was necessary. It wasn't that it was me being special in any way. It was me realizing that I needed to create a change, and I needed to, like, it gave me my life. Each time I made those changes, I had a new lease on life. And I kind of feel bad that I had to run out the old lease before I gave myself a new lease, less the last time. The last time, hi Roslyn, welcome. Good to have you here. The last time it was more clearly from choice. Before I was in absolute desperation. So I can be grateful to recognize that I'm listening better. But we all have this voice that is within us, and we've we've most of us have spent a lifetime denying that voice and not hearing it and tuning it out and talking over it. And what we get to do is to recover it. And so when we talk about life as a gift, even the hardships of our lives, and maybe sometimes especially the hardships of our lives, are there to help us rechart our course. And the question is, how soon are we going to listen? So I think this is a really, really rich and important topic, particularly at this time of year where the season is darker. There is more darkness, in our day, in our 24-hour day. And there's so much going on in the world, and our holidays are very different than they've been, and perhaps a lot lonelier, and maybe more fear filled, and maybe filled more with loss, and maybe not. I'm sure there are people who are feeling joyful and who are feeling abundant and blessed, and all of that exists too, and thankfully it does. It's just that I know that navigating the hard stuff is harder than, or the dark stuff is harder than navigating the joyful stuff. So that's why I'm speaking into that now. Um, there's there's so much possibility for us to take these moments and allow them to be moments of deepening, and allow them to be moments of insight, and allow it to be, if you're moving through a difficult time, allow it to be a difficult time on your pilgrimage. It doesn't mean the pilgrimage is over. It's still enriching you as you move through this and past. You can move past this time of challenge. Then there is the deepening that you received, or that you achieved in the process, the honing, the refinement, the deepening that will make you richer as you proceed on the journey. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope it's something that you can apply. Um, Life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. And in that way, we move from victimhood into appreciation. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up for today. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is The Core Connection. And I go live every weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. I invite you, please, to check out the other wonderful programming. And thank you for the thank yous, Danette and Tammy. Yeah, there's this good stuff to think about, right? And you're so welcome, and it's my privilege to be with you. So I'm tremendously grateful to share these moments with you. And hello, Luz. Welcome, welcome. So until next time, hopefully I'll see you here again tomorrow.